Previously, a motley group of misfits made up of Sienna the Goblin, Sager the Furbolg, Dewey the Otterfolk, and Narena the Tidekin were called to a meeting of the Guardians of the Vale in Sword Peak City. There were rumors of a ghost ship attacking coastal communities, and the next attack was assumed to be happening in 2 days' time, as they seemed to be occurring every 4 days. The group was then asked to look into it. The group decided to head to a local shrine to get information from a survivor of a previous attack. On the way, a pickpocket managed to steal some of Dewey's prized belongings, by which I mean books. That led to a merry chase through the city, which caused all sorts of chaos and drew the attention of a green-cloaked praetor. Despite that, they managed to make it to the shrine without anyone being arrested or killed, and they had a conversation with the clearly addled survivor. They were calling him Yip, because that was one of the few things he was consistently saying other than ranting about eyes in a storm. Narena asked him some questions about the attack, and he started accusing merfolk of being behind them. Sager took a look at his injuries and could tell that they seemed to have come from something made of wood or bone. Then Dewey walked up and tried to calm him down. The conversation turned to the moons, and Dewey realized that with 2 moons, there were changes to the moon phases every 4 days, which matched the timeline of the attacks. They were clearly related to the moon cycles. As a witch, Narena realized that was probably a sign someone was using the moons to empower whatever they were doing. Not the next moon cycle, but the one after was going to be a very prominent one, with 1 full moon and 1 new moon. One of the clerics at the shrine told the group that there was an imperial investigator who had come by a few times to talk to Yip, and she suggested that the group go talk to her. The group made their way to where the investigator was staying to talk with her and let her know what they found so far. When Sager mentioned that it looked like Yip's injuries were caused by wood or bone, she pulled out a few improvised weapons made of wood with sharp bones attached with a sticky substance used by various merfolk and sea elves. Narena looked at them and realized they clearly were made by someone who was trying to make it look like it was merfolk weapons, but they weren't actually made by merfolk. After some back and forth, the investigator told them that she suspected the next attack would be at Vol'dran's Watch. The group told her they'd head there to try to do something about it. Then the group turned to leave, and a green-cloaked praetor walked in. He made a beeline for the investigator, who he was working with. Then he froze as he noticed the group. There was a long pause as the praetor clearly recognized Dewey. Dewey, in turn, realized almost instantly why the praetor was staring at him. They managed to talk their way out of it as the praetor decided it wasn't worth the trouble considering they were the only ones trying to help. They picked up a job at the Wyvern's Claw to gather thornwood while traveling down the river. Then they made their way to the harbor. Narena was insistent that they rent a raft themselves instead of being passengers. Sager was a little skeptical, but he didn't argue since both she and Dewey seemed to think it was fine. The group went to buy some supplies, heading to a curio shop that sold magical items under the table to those in the know. They bought a few items to help them. Once the shopping was finished, the group headed back to the harbor to pick up the raft they'd rented. Then they started down the river, and the trip went surprisingly well at first. Partway down the river, they noticed some of the thornwood they'd been told about. Narena was focused on gathering some for herself, while Sienna let Sager, who could walk on water, carry them over to the plants. He attached a rope to them and let them go diving under the water to carefully cut some of the wood from the root system with their short sword. Because is it really even a mini-campaign if you don't go fishing with at least one member of the group? After getting the first bit of wood, Sienna spoke with the trees to ask them a few questions, as they wanted to make sure they didn't take too much of the roots and hurt them. The trees thanked them for that and warned them about some glass serpents that like to sharpen their teeth on the roots. Around that point, Dewey noticed a fin in the water heading towards Sager and Sienna. He shouted out a warning, and Sager quickly made a beeline for the shore. Dewey was certain he'd read in a book somewhere that glass serpents were scared away by loud noises and splashing in the water, so he did just that. As he did, Nareda realized immediately he was essentially ringing the dinner bell, as that was how Prey acted. And that is where we left off.